Critical thinking is the ability to evaluate information presented to us objectively and impartially. It means questioning what is presented to us, analyzing sources, checking the veracity of facts, and drawing our own conclusions. A critical mind enables us to avoid falling into the trap of false information, preconceived ideas, or prejudices. In short, to avoid succumbing to the mollusk effect I introduced in a previous video. Whether you're a teacher, a student, or even an employee, you'll understand that it's an essential skill in today's world. A world in which we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides. Developing a critical mind means learning to think for yourself, to filter essential content, to reason logically, and to make informed decisions. As teachers, we have a responsibility to pass on reliable, quality knowledge to our students. Critical thinking is therefore a key factor in ensuring our credibility. Before continuing, I'd like to digress for a moment to talk about the persuasion model developed by Carl Hovland and Irving Janis. You may know this model as the Yale model. Why am I referring to this model? Simply because, according to this model, the credibility and expertise perceived by our students influence its persuasive effectiveness. Content that is deemed reliable, competent, and trustworthy will have more impact than a source with little credibility. This model emphasizes the psychological processes by which the persuasive message is processed, such as attention, comprehension, acceptance, and retention in long-term memory. This persuasive mechanic is therefore perfect for facilitating learning in our students to aim for the highest levels of learning. Without it, we end up with students who are passive, unmotivated, and prone to dropping out. Developing our critical thinking skills should therefore enable us to evaluate the sources we use to develop our learning content, to question the teaching methods considered as references, and to innovate by adopting approaches better adapted to our students' needs. But beware, developing a critical mindset is not the same as developing a protesting mindset. Rather, I bring a questioning approach to validate whether a content applies to our course, or whether an approach or pedagogical model considered as a reference is adapted to our context or pedagogical environment. Critical thinking therefore helps us to develop our capacity for analysis and reflection, making us better able to understand the different learning styles of our students and adapt our pedagogy accordingly to make thoughtful choices. What's more, by cultivating our own critical thinking skills, we encourage our students to do the same. We give them the skills to question what they are taught, to think for themselves, and to develop their own reasoning. This prepares them to become enlightened citizens, capable of making thoughtful decisions and freeing themselves from preconceived ideas. Of course, it also means putting ourselves at risk. In fact, we challenge our own students to question us, and that's what I like. To have cohorts who ask me mature, profound questions with substance. I want to have learners who may disagree with me to take my teaching to another level. With the arrival of generative AI in education, it's more crucial than ever to cultivate our critical thinking skills. In a previous video, I presented several use cases for creating learning content, pedagogical scenarios, or even encouraging problem solving with tailor-made case studies. We also looked at the possibilities for assessment and how to vary the formats for authentic assessment and how to make the use of generative AI absurd for students who give in to stress and the temptation to lack integrity, cheat. In this context, it's essential not to succumb to the mollusk effect, so we need to develop and maintain a critical mindset. First of all, we need to be able to thoroughly evaluate the different language models available, their strengths, weaknesses, and areas of application. Each model has its own characteristics, which we need to understand if we are to use them effectively. Critical thinking means questioning the possible impact of these technologies on teaching and learning processes. How can these tools enrich our practices while ensuring that they do not replace human expertise and personalized interaction with our students? How can we ensure that the use of generative AI respects intellectual property rights and does not create new inequalities, biases, or forms of cheating? We therefore need to think about the ethical issues involved in using generative AI in education, such as data confidentiality and security. Intellectual property issues are becoming increasingly important and have an impact on our use of generative AIs, both to develop content and to evaluate student work. Critical thinking can go as far as questioning whether these content generation tools respect the values of equity, inclusion, and the development of learner autonomy. For my part, I'm taking my thinking as far as ESG issues, but that's for a later video. Teachers and students must therefore be able to evaluate the various language models available in a nuanced way, understand their pedagogical and ethical implications, and make informed choices that best serve the needs of each individual. Most language models have their own content generation tool, but there's one that's getting a lot of attention at the moment: Perplexity. Perplexity doesn't use an exclusive language model of its own. Instead, it's an interface for accessing and interacting with different models, LLMs. More precisely, Perplexity enables you to switch between different models without even realizing it. To conclude this video, I've decided to stick with language models because a list of tools would be endless and obsolete by next week. So, for the creation of learning content, GPT or Claude are excellent choices for generating fluid text on a variety of subjects. I'd even go so far as to recommend Claude's Sonnet version for this task. Gemini or Google Bard are also very powerful and perhaps more accessible, but if you work in French like me, Mistral is an alternative not to be overlooked. GPT or Claude Haiku can help you structure your courses, analyze databases, or make the most of your note-taking. For correction and feedback on assignments, models such as Jurassic or Claude Opus are trained specifically for text evaluation and correction. However, for accessibility and content adaptation needs, models such as Parlem from Google or GLM from Microsoft can help you reformulate, simplify, or translate texts. Even if for the latter, Google Traduction and DeepL remain the absolute references in my opinion for general public needs. For visual creation, you'll find models such as Stable Diffusion or dall-e. For video or music, AI generation tools usually use their own LLM.